Welcome to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, our weekly podcast for software sales professionals who want to sell better. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, make Software Sales Simplified your home for insights, developments, and news from the world of enterprise software sales. I'm Matt Long, and I'm joined with my esteemed colleague, 𝗵𝗲𝗿.
How's everybody doing today? Looking forward to having our guest and talking with him. Good friend of ours.
Thanks, Kevin. Together, we have about 50 years of software sales experience and implementation as well. And we're happy that you joined us today to talk with another industry expert. Before we get started, though, I want to remind you to like and subscribe, unfollow, and just to stay abreast of our latest episodes as they come out. So today we're joined with an old friend of mine and colleague, Derek Francis. Derek and I worked together probably, started about 15 plus years ago.
Gosh, has it really been that long now? Yeah, I think that's about right. Let's see, when you and I first met one another, it was probably, what was it? Trying to think now, like 2010, 2009. Does that sound about right?
10, 11, I think, somewhere around there. It seems a lot longer for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty funny. It does.
Yeah, but we worked together along with Kevin. All three of us actually worked at a company called 𝗵𝗲𝗿, which was a kind of experience analytics company and was eventually bought by IBM. So we've been on a journey together and actually have crossed paths and worked together at a couple different companies since then. But Derek, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of where you got your start.
Absolutely. Yeah, great to meet everybody. Thanks a lot for having me. It's great to see the two of you, great friends, colleagues. Gosh, how many tours of duty between the three of us have we done together now? It's like 3, 4, 5 tours of duty now, it seems like. And, it's great when you're working with great people that you know their capabilities, how well you integrate and work together. And this has just it's been a fun journey together between the three of us. So I'm Derek Francis. Great to meet the audience here. I've been a seasoned GTM executive for 25 years now. Started my career, right out of college. Got offered an opportunity to work for Computer Associates as an enterprise sales rep. And for the last 17 years, I've been leading teams anywhere from 4 to 100 plus people. One of my claims to fame is, I drove global expansion of a $4 million startup, Israeli startup company to over 300 million in revenue. We were able to close funding all the way through Series F to the tune of $1.3 billion. And when I left, the company was around a $6 billion valuation. But I've worked for small companies, I worked for medium companies, worked for large companies, kind of everything in between. And I think what I love to do the most is I love to scale. And I love working with young sales teams that I can help coach, I can help enable, I can help grow, and honestly driving a really, exciting product line and building a go-to-market strategy, whether you're a pre-revenue company that I've worked for all the way up to, the IBMs of my career. So it's been a fun 25 years, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Well, that's great. I want to get back to the kind of building that company from 4 million to 300 million in a bit. But why don't you tell us, how did you get your start? I mean, I don't even know what your degree is in, but how did you get into sales, I guess, right out of college?
Oh my gosh, believe it or not, I went to school for electrical engineering of all things. And
Really?
I pivoted after starting a consulting company back in my college days. And gosh, this is, call it 1997, 1998. At the time, Y2K was a thing. And I remember we were doing Y2K conversions, was part of one of my consulting engagements that was taking up a lot of my time. And I was working, I had a project at Ford Motor Company, working at the Fairlane Training and Development Center. I'm from Michigan, by the way. I'm a Midwesterner. It was a fun journey, but I think that I love the human engagement part of the work that I was doing more than anything. And I remember encountering an HR VP that for a small printing company that I was working with, and she was just like, "Gosh, you're such a personable guy, and have you ever thought about trying your hand at sales? I think you'd do great with the business that we're in." And honestly, I think, having that technical expertise and that technical background would really, really lend itself really well to that. And so I moved to the dark side and I went and took a job working for this business. It was a company called 𝘪𝗵 Computer Products. Gosh, back, I want to say it was 1998 at the time. And we were selling warehouse management solutions. We were selling, 3D print capabilities, print machines through Printtronics and Zebra printers, as well as everything up to RFID at the time, which was a little bit ahead of its time, but I learned so much about the importance of enterprise software, importance of the technology to support a supply chain. And, and I loved it. I was hooked. I was instantaneously, in. And at the time, I moved my degree to be more focused on business so I could learn and absorb as much as I possibly could. And I had my first shot. And so that's really how I started my career that way.
That's great. I mean, getting back to that Y2K thing, what a great, compelling event to have as a sales tool.
Yeah.
I remember, just a little aside, back then I worked for the federal judiciary and I ran the computer operations for the Ninth Circuit. And of course, that was hot on everyone's mind. All efforts were focused on that. And I remember waking up on the morning of of 2000, of the turn of the century there. And just looking out, we were out in Marin, and all I saw was just clouds. And I was just thinking, is the world still exists outside of here? And it did, and it was. But anyway.
It's amazing how those ones and zeros, how they impacted and changed so many people's lives, right? Oh my God.
When Matt went and pulled me out of Deloitte, that's what I was focusing on at that time. Most of what we were doing there were Y2K conversions. And for people that are too young that are listening to the podcast that don't know what the whole hubbub was about, that it was all about the fact that originally applications, programs, mainframes were not set up for dates that were going to change over at the beginning of the century. And everyone was concerned that all of these systems were going to go down the second the dates flipped over to 2000. Because they would not be able to determine sequencing, data would get completely munged. The sky is falling was definitely what people were talking
Power
about.
grids were going to go out, banking systems were going to fail, everything.
Things were going to fall out of the sky. You name it, it was the end of the world as we know it. But because of that, all three of us here were involved in projects that were all around transforming that and getting it up to speed. So all of us sat there on New Year's Eve, waiting for all hell to break loose, and it never happened. So
I know it. It's funny. What an amazing parallel to something that happened back in 2022 as well, right? If you think about it. So dogs and cats living together, fire and brimstone. What's going to happen next? But I don't know. False alarm.
Yeah, for sure. So we all worked at 𝘵𝗵, which was a great experience, kind of a company that was making its way, kind of inventing a category, I would say, so much so that IBM eventually bought us. And then I think we both stuck it out at IBM for a bit, but I don't know about you, Derek, but for me, the big company aspect, a big brother aspect of having just that weight behind you had benefits from sometimes a sales perspective, but also kind of was limiting in terms of just movement and creativity, et cetera. So we eventually all left and went to smaller companies again. And you landed at one in particular that was pretty hot at the time. In fact, we lost one deal to them. And I think that was when we were at 𝘵𝗵, right? And then that was the impetus. It's like, this is something. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with it was Clicktale, I think, at that time, and how you were tasked for really building out the whole North America sales operation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was U.S. employee number one when I came on board at Clicktale, and it was a very fun story in how I got there. But, even leading up to that, just to kind of talk to a point that you just made, I had, at this point in my career, I had worked for Computer Associates. I had worked for MicroStrategy. I kind of had been there, done that, working for the big company at that stage. And when IBM acquired 𝘵𝗵, there is a lot of bureaucracy. And, IBM's a fantastic company. I don't want to say anything against them. I learned a lot there. There's still a number of executives and folks that I interface with there every day that I still am close with. But at the same time, I'm a creator and I like to build and I like to have that that piece of molding clay that I could turn into a beautiful sculpture. And I felt that that wasn't really giving me the creative liberty to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was scale and build a GTM strategy. And candidly, I just didn't want to be, another number in a multi-billion-dollar organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. So I did make the switch, but I remember the conversation so vividly, even today, thinking about what happened. And what happened was I was working a multi-million-dollar transaction with a Canadian telecom, which the two of you were both involved with at the time. And we were very close with the chief digital officer and a number of folks in the executive team. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, it was about an 18-month sales cycle that we were involved in. Very, very long, winding, interfacing, integrating with a lot of different personalities, building a very comprehensive sales strategy to be able to win the business. And we had just gotten to the 5-yard line to win the deal. And here comes this little old Israeli, 40-person company and that said, hey, if I could give you 60% of the functionality that you're getting from IBM, but I could do it at 20% of the cost, would that be compelling to have a conversation? And of course, the CDO at the time said, yeah, absolutely. IBM is trying to push me into an ELA and jam a bunch of security software down, our throats that we didn't necessarily need or want. And, this other company really wanted this customer experience management solution that made sense for our business. This was what we were sold. And at the time, the CDO reached out to the founder and CEO of Clicktale and said, hey, listen, I'm going to go with you guys, but you got to talk to this guy, Derek Francis, too. It's a bit of a package deal. You need to go and have a conversation with him and bring him on, too. We want to be working with him. And we formed the rapport with him. And the reason why we're moving forward with this is because of the work that him and his team had did at the time. And the CEO flew into town along with the CRO of this company. And we sat down over a very nice dinner in Bellevue, Washington, I was living at the time. And after a few whiskeys at the end of the night, we were, of course, trying to solve all the world's problems. And they presented me with an opportunity to come on board and to help build their North American business, which, they had very little presence, in at the time. And I had a conversation with my wife and we sat down and we were, newly married, did not have any kids at the time. And, she gave me some great advice. She looked at me and she said, you know what, Derek, you could stay and hang out at IBM, be safe and make, $250,000 or more every single year. Consistently, we'll have a great life. Or you could go somewhere and put your stamp on something and do what you do and have the opportunity to build something the way that you know how to. And I thought a lot about it. And I said, you know what, I'm in. I'm going to try it. I'm going to go down this pathway. And so that's what led me to taking the job at Clicktale. And so it was a lot of fun. We came on board and, I think that a great piece of advice that I have for any aspiring sales leader or anybody that's looking to start up at a new emerging company for the very first time is you're only as strong as your network. And the people around you are the best reflection on who you are as a leader and who you are as an individual contributor. And so one of the first things that I did when I came to Clicktale was, I tapped in a lot of folks that I worked with back in my tea leaf days and people that I had within my network that I knew what they were capable of. And I built our teams around that. And candidly, it helped accelerate our success just because I knew what I could rely on from those people and what they were able to give to me and what they were able to give to the business. And you look for complementary pieces that all fit together and work together cohesively at the end of the day. So you build a Navy SEAL team, you build a winning basketball team. Don't go out there and try to build a team full of Tom Brady's. You're never going to be successful if you do something like that.
Yeah, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more because one thing that's always impressed me about you and working with you is, building a sense of culture and team, right? Because as sales leaders, a lot of times you're focused on individual contributors and maximizing their ability to do stuff kind of alone. I mean, it is a team game, right? You do have teamwork there, but a lot of times you're just sending people out and they're just like taking down deals, delivering, etc. But I think it's always more effective when you have a sense of camaraderie, fun, teamwork, etc. Because I can remember just you and I walking into many business meetings at that time, and we're joking, we're having fun, And that was a big part of our selling as well, was that they wanted to do business with us because, not only they thought we were capable, but like it was just fun to be around. It was like we're doing hard work, but we're having a good time doing it. So if you can talk a little bit more about, how you develop that teamwork and how you're identifying people that maybe didn't have the track record in enterprise sales initially, but you kind of, what did you identify in them that made you think this would be a good person to add to the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, culture is everything. When you're a strong leader, and you always want to invest in and develop your internal talent before you go outside of that. And so I've always subscribed to a methodology called the 4 quadrants of situational leadership. And so it's, again, I talk about the fact that you don't want to build a team full of Tom Brady's. You need people to be role players. And so I've always developed and built my teams like the Navy SEALs operate. Everybody doesn't have the same skill set. Everybody has their own individual roles and are complementary to one another. And so when I got to the point in my sales career, when I took over a named account team, we built vertical specialties, and we built a pod around supporting some of the customers we were charging after, whether they were an existing client or whether they were a net new client. So everybody kind of helped and sold using the reference and going in there, knowing what the application was that they were able to intertwine with. So when I talk about the 4 quadrants of situational leadership, it's the fact that you are going to have people that are strong at delegating, supporting, coaching, and then ultimately directing. You want to be able to move people through that wave and through those 4 quadrants that you're going to successfully develop somebody that way. So it's about the fact that, you're going to have somebody that's going to have strong leadership capabilities. And then you're also going to have people that, you don't need to give a lot of direction to, that they know exactly what their tasks are, and they're going to go there and they're going to charge towards any of their individual contribution goals and KPIs that they have that they want to be able to achieve. So I always look for that when I'm hiring people and when I'm building teams. That was a hard lesson that I had to learn when I was a first-time manager. I stepped into this role, and I was thrust into an RVP role after many, many years as an individual contributor. And my first thought around how I was going to be able to scale and build the business was I needed to go find people that had fancy college degrees and people that had all of this experience and industry segment experience and had years of W-2 performance and wild successes. And I hired a lot of those folks, and I crashed and burned doing it. It was really brutal going through that process. And it was a very tough life lesson that I learned, only because I had built myself a team of prima donnas that all had very strong opinions about the way that they were doing things. And it was like I was hiring the same person over and over and over again. And when I felt like I had a lot more success is when I found somebody that had an appetite and had that fire and had that desire to learn and to grow. And I brought those people on board to develop them. So to this day, thinking of the $100+ million in software transactions that I've done, that I've been tied to, teams that I've ran that have been tied to, I would say the things that I'm most proud about is the development of a number of folks that have worked for me and bringing them on board. One person in particular was actually on your podcast before, Sarah Levinson. And I remember, she was an inside rep at IBM. We had worked together, adjacently at IBM. And she was one of my first hires that I brought on board to Clicktale. And she was so wildly successful. Every day she would walk into work and she would say, Derek, I felt like today was going to be the day you're going to fire me. And I would look at her very confused and say, what are you talking about, Sarah? You're crushing it right now. And you're doing so good. You're like running circles around the rest of the team. And she would say, I tell myself this, and I go every morning and I look myself in the mirror and I'm like, I have to be 1% better. I have to push myself a little bit harder. I know that I can be better. I know that I can grow a little bit more. And I just loved that attitude. And I loved that her drive and her passion, and to see her as an executive now and to watch her star climb over the years and all the success that she's had is so more gratifying to me than any transaction or any deal that I've ever been part of in my entire career.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful. Sarah's great. And I remember meeting her back then as well. I think we had some event up there in Seattle and she was there. And very personal. And I think that's a great approach in terms of doing that, because there was a trend in the Bay Area for a long time where a lot of these top companies were only hiring Ivy League players, people, right?
Yeah.
Degrees. And I remember being very frustrated at the time because I don't have one. But at the same time, that pivoted over the years because they started realizing that you're getting the same person, very smart, very capable, but it's the same person, right, across the board. And the culture, I think, really lacked in some of these companies. So I think that's a great insight that you have there.
Yeah.
I do want to switch a little bit as we're talking about scaling. And this has been a challenge for a lot of companies where they get a lot of money and all of a sudden they hire a ton of salespeople. And we see it over and over again where they overhire, the territories get down, they don't have their messaging right. So what has your approach been? Because obviously there's always pressure to scale quickly, but with hiring correctly and not overhiring, and how do you kind of implement and deploy people appropriately to help the business grow kind of organically, even though you're trying to push it a little bit faster than you want?
I go back to my comment about complementary skill sets and bringing people on board that I know solve a unique challenge and can also make you as a sales organization very multifaceted. And I think when you start to duplicate those efforts without having the revenue to back it up or the pipeline to back it up, that's when you get yourself in trouble and you get your hand caught in the cookie jar very, very fast. And I've had that experience before, and it's very frustrating at the end of the day. And I'm going to use a reference back from my past again. I love to use Michigan references, but like I look at the Bad Boys era. If anybody's familiar with the Pistons back in 88, 89, 89, 90, when they won back-to-back championships. Like there was not really a superstar on those teams. You had, people remember Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars and some of the folks that were on the team, but the reality is that they played together as a unit. And when you are operating successfully in enterprise sales, you're operating as a unit. A Navy SEAL team, when they're deployed, they operate as a unit. There is a book that was written by 𝘆cie𝘂'𝗹𝗋, and he talks about, there's a chapter in the book where he talks about prioritize and execute. And that's the way you have to think about going into every single deal. When you get to a point where you are over hiring before you have the pipeline to substantiate it, or even the growth trajectory to substantiate it, it's just, it's a mistake, quite honestly. It leads to, a lot of unfun things like layoffs and, putting yourself in a position where you have to make some course corrections, which nobody ever really wants to do. So be young, be scrappy, be multifaceted, hire people that can be Swiss Army knives that can take on multiple things and multiple roles. And most importantly, leverage your network, especially if you're a sales leader these days. I have learned very, very quickly that I don't like to hire people that I don't know or somebody that's trusted within my network doesn't already know. And I've gotten burned going down those paths as well. Everybody loves to bring on the fancy recruiters and recruiting firms and try to find the unicorn sales rep out there that has done everything. And in my mind, I think that's a mistake, because somebody might look very, very good on paper, but that doesn't necessarily translate to real world. So it's like the NFL draft that's going on right now, where you have all of these college kids right now that are hoping and praying to get drafted and end up making it up in the NFL. And you see certain players that maybe fall down the draft boards or don't get drafted where you think that they're going to do. And it's so difficult to predict, because a lot of it's so much more than having the skill set. It's having the intelligence. It's having the mentality. It's having the drive. It's having the passion. And how could you know all of those things unless you've worked with that person, that individual before? So I don't know. I think that, you always start with a core group of individuals that, and you trust and you align to, and you've had shared successes with, and you build from there. And when you believe that when you have to scale, when you guys are all at max capacity and you feel like you've taken on too much and everybody's wearing too many hats, in my mind and my eyes, that's the time when you want to go out and you want to hire more.
Yeah, that's a great insight there as well, because I've been in so many companies where they just seem to overhire, and I do think, to your point about hiring on paper, what looks good on paper is a very common thing. I remember some of my first managerial and director roles where I hired people because I thought they fit the model of what I needed, and against my better instinct. And over time, you start trusting your instincts more about who they are. And again, who they know and if you know someone who can kind of vouch for them. So I do want to switch a little bit. I know that recently you have taken a little bit of a career shift, but before we do that, maybe talk a little bit about the changes you've seen over the years in enterprise software sales, and kind of what's led up to this change for you. And then we could talk about that for the last last part of the podcast here.
It's been a very interesting few years for me, and I went from working in B2B SaaS for 24 plus years to, taking on some, I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing now and, in the creator economy, in the creator space. But what really led up to that is again, I keep going back to trusting my network and tapping into my network. And I called a few CDOs that I know, and I asked them, where do you see the world going and the world heading and your universe heading right now? And before I decided to take on a few of my prior roles, a lot of them said the same thing. It was AI, it was automation, and it was security. Like, these were the trends that we were starting to see in the enterprise software space. And if you were not subscribing or investing in any one of those three areas, you're going to be very hard pressed to sell any software right now. And sure enough, you look at the last couple of years of the industry, MarTech has been unbelievably stressed. Everybody's trying to do more with less. Everybody's trying to invest heavily in AI. And, and security has become paramount right now, especially with everything that's going, everybody trying to become global companies and global businesses these days. I think about that, and I think about those conversations that I had, and I try to steer the ship into fields and businesses that really line up well with those three core functional areas. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that. And, also, a big fundamental core of my core DNA is I like to be fun. I like to have fun. I like to do things that challenge me, that interest me, that excite me. I love to wake up every day and feel fulfilled and be excited about what I'm doing. And, and that's critical. I have to have that, I don't want to wake up every day and dread going to work or dread what I'm doing. I need to be, wake up every day and feel like I'm gratified with what I'm involved in, what I'm invested in. So that's really kind of led me to where I'm at today and what I've been doing. And with the stress that's been put on the MarTech space, I got approached about a year and change ago from an executive that I trust and I've known for a very long time, and said, hey, I've got a really, really interesting opportunity for you that I think really could benefit from your skill set and the work that you've done in your career. And it was in the creator space, and it was for working for an e-commerce company and going in there. They were a competitor to Shopify and was more of a bespoke version of a Shopify that we were selling, and introduced me at the time to the CEO. I had some great conversations, and at the time I had, two other opportunities that had presented themselves that were both in MarTech, both in the SaaS world. And I don't know, the creator economy position just spoke to me. It was like, gosh, this is really interesting and really new. And one of my core principles that I believe in is you need to become multifaceted. You have to grow. You have to try different things. And if you're not doing that kind of stuff, you're doing yourself a disservice at the end of the day. And I remember talking to the both of you at the time too, and presenting these three opportunities that I had. And both of you said the same thing. You said, you know what? Try something new. Why not? This is the time, you're not getting any younger. This is the time in your career that it's worth doing something like this and giving it a go. And I've learned a lot of life lessons, and I can talk to you a little bit more about them, through that journey. But that was really what led to the pivot and led for me leaving the B2B space, and joining, the creator economy.
Yeah, well, I don't want to take full credit for it, but I do remember having that conversation with you where you presented. It's like, a lot of this sounds like more of the same, and I thought it sounded compelling. I knew nothing about it either, right? But the chance to then pivot into something different that has a different set of needs, right, than the business, right? Business is still flourishing. There's a lot of money in there, and you can make a good living. But at the same time, it's a different set of needs that you're appealing to. And that I think, was very interesting, and I'm glad it worked out. So what have you found out, I guess, tell us a little bit about your new role, right, and the new company, but also I'd be interested in how you've applied your experience in enterprise sales to this new industry, right? And what have you found out? What surprised you about that?
Yeah, what I found out is you have different challenges, in this industry. And I think that there's a lot of businesses that are fake it till you make it, in this world and this universe that I'm operating within. And, you have a less of an intersection between, the creative mind and the business focused mind. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap with what I've been doing over the course of the last year and change. And it's great because like I'm learning a lot about this industry, but it's also I think that a lot of my experience has lent itself very well to helping this business scale and grow predictably as well. So I'm still very focused on when you're a CRO, you have two different initiatives that guide you every single day. It's predictably hitting the company revenue target every single time, and it's boosting the productivity of revenue producing employees. That is applicable whether you're doing that in B2B SaaS or you're doing that in the creator economy. At the end of the day, pipeline is pipeline. It doesn't matter what industry that you're in. And so that is something that's been very interesting that I've learned in this space, is that a lot of these businesses operate without that predictability, and it's always running to that next silver bullet, what's going to get us the most revenue the fastest. And I'm trying to instill healthy principles of creating a linear business and a predictable business by way of driving the right amount of pipeline. So I've tried to intertwine and intermesh a lot of my strong software network into this business, and it's translated really successfully. So the only downside has been, a lot of these individuals have had to learn the creator economy very, very fast. But it's high velocity. It's a lot of fun. One day you could be talking to an esports gamer. The next day you could be talking to a country music, artist. And, every day's fun. I love the dinner table conversation with me and my family when I'm sitting around and, my kids are asking me, what did I do today? And I'm telling them that, I talked to the #1 Fortnite gamer in the world, or, I'm talking to, somebody who just literally won The Voice, like anybody like that is really cool to have those types of conversations with. And it's exciting. So it's been a fun transition over into this space, but a lot of the same principles of building a go-to-market strategy are entirely applicable over at this business as well.
So it is a thrilling and let's say immature market, right? It's starting to manifest itself. It's becoming a little bit more commonplace, but by the very nature, some of the challenges that you just described, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges with the folks you're trying to service? You're trying to bring along and mature. What do you think some of the biggest challenges those folks are experiencing as you're trying to take what you've learned over the years of how to scale and grow business and translate that into terms that they can understand?
Gosh, that's such a challenging question, because there's no easy answer to that. And what I mean by that is that we are interfacing with a lot of small business owners and folks that understand how to sell and make money really successfully. But to do that in a predictable way is very hard.
Very hard.
So a lot of my skill set and a lot of the time that I've invested in my career, I try to apply a lot of those same methodologies and principles to the folks that I'm working with. We're in the process of building out our website and building out our brand presence right now. And one of the things that I was sharing with our web development team, in fact, today, was, when you're interfacing with a creator, the ultimate goal is for that creator to become a brand, and for that brand to become a business, and for that business to become global. And so you have to take them on that journey step by step. And a lot of these creators these days are wildly successful, making money hand over fist, but they don't really quite understand what it takes to become a brand presence. And so you have to educate them on it. And it's almost, again, you're applying the principles of entrepreneurship and small business ownership. And again, a lot of the work that I've done in the software space in terms of the scaling that I've done, you're reapplying that, but just on an individual basis with somebody.
Yeah, so you're really taking the same sort of approach, but applying it to a completely different industry and different set of individuals as well that have different needs and backgrounds. And In my mind, it's not unlike, all the, the startups that are coming and people that are trying to scale and things like that. I mean, they might have good ideas, but they don't know how to go to market. And the same thing applies, right? A lot of times I've seen companies that they'll get some seasoned sales executive who's done this with other companies, but it's a completely different industry and their approach doesn't quite work, right?
That's
As an
right.
example. Where other ones, go in there and they just understand these are the basic motions you need to have, but you need to be flexible to whatever the culture is, as well as the product and the space, etc. So, I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about, well, I don't even think we mentioned the company you're at currently, but it's addressing more than just creators, right? There's like it could be like team sports for youth leagues, or corporate merch is a great one, right? Where it's like you're actually, a lot of companies, they just want swag for their employees or for whatever. That's also an industry. So the tangible nature of it is really interesting to me, because I've been in software sales for so long, where it's just like just bits and bytes out there, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, no, no. You're totally right. And it's funny. I talk a lot about, when you're building a house, to be able to build a house successfully, you have to lay the foundation the right way. And, in a lot of the work that I'm doing at this current company, by the way, the company that I'm working for is called 𝗵𝗵𝘁. And it's, I think that, when you have a great network and you meet great people, and great people find a way to engage and work together. And I ended up meeting the founder of 𝗵𝗁, Alex Young, by way of my first opportunity within the creator landscape. And I was drawn to working with Alex. He was a good guy, and he operated and he built this company based on honesty and integrity, and everything with his business is very innovation driven, which this is an industry that is just learning what that means, which is why I was really drawn to the work that he was doing. And it was very, very unique and very cutting edge with a lot of the stuff that I was seeing out there, which is part of the reason why I'm here. But back to my point about the plumbing and the pouring the right foundation of the house, when you're supporting a creator and building a business, you're doing the same exact thing. And so like you're having to educate them on, approving themselves and taking proof steps the same way you would run an enterprise sales cycle as well. So it's like, guys, you don't need the flying car right now. You don't need to go after, the big grandiose, 20 line apparel, or 20 item apparel line right now. What you want to do is go out there and build a successful product that you can prove yourself and cut your teeth with and grow from there. And from there, you can launch the apparel line. And from there, you can launch the brand, store. And from there, you can open up a distribution channel. And so it's just about layering and continue to build and build and build and build. And if you're doing it the right way, then, the sky's the limit. And everything that I've learned in my career and everything that I've done for the last 25 years, I'm just doing it right now in a micro climate, in a micro fashion, where every person I'm working with, I'm trying to start a company and build a business with.
Yeah. And, in terms of tapping your network appropriately, I should disclose that I have been helping you with the GTM go-to-market functionality, the rebranding of the website, kind of creating these solutions and things like that, and casting it in new ways. I think that has been interesting. So it's been an exciting journey for me as well to help you on this. Also, because again, it's applying all the things that we've learned in enterprise sales over the years, just to a slightly different industry, slightly different people, etc. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You're trying to articulate value in a way that people understand, that's meaningful to them, and will motivate them to take next steps. And part of this journey as well has been trying to outline, what are the next steps? How do I guide this person? It's not unlike we did with selling software. A lot of times the companies, they wanted the solution, they wanted to get here, they didn't know how to get there. And so part of our job was to help them step by step understand, well, then you're going to have to do this, and then you this, and prepare them for that. So I don't really see it a whole lot different than enterprise sales, even though it's a completely different space. But to what you were saying earlier, the fact that it is different and new and unique is refreshing in some respects as well.
It is. It's exciting. I love the action here, and I love the high velocity environment, and the fact that, I wake up every day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my day is going to go and who I'm going to be talking to today. I mean, the customer base is so diverse and so different, and there's such unique challenges that you need to solve for. But ultimately, to your point, it's all about what's the compelling event, and how do you scale predictably with whatever you're doing, and whether it again is designing a t-shirt or building an apparel line, or building out a Shopify store and launching an e-commerce strategy. There's always an end state, and there's always the foundation you have to pour that house before you're ready to build on that house.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Derek, it's always a pleasure talking with you, and we talk a lot regardless, but I think it's been really an insightful podcast for our listeners across a whole gamut of different things. But do you have any final thoughts about anything you'd like to impart before we go?
Yeah, I do. Don't be afraid to try new things in life. Every day you need to grow a little bit, no matter what it is, and no matter what your profession is, whether you're work in a machine shop, or whether you're the CEO of a company. You need to become multifaceted. And it's been a very important principle and guiding principle of my career, where if I'm not going to learn something new, if I'm not going to try something new, if I'm not going to grow in some way, I don't want to take that job on. I don't want to take that opportunity on. And so every position and every role that I've always taken is like, can I try to find a way to become better and learn a little bit more than I did the role before? And that's part of the reason why what gets me up in the morning. And I hope that anybody listening to the podcast, I hope they take that inside, and they're able to apply the same principles to their own lives.
That's great advice and a great inspiration as well. If people want to get in touch with you, either to talk more about 𝗵𝗁 or just about things in general, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
And so my email address is pretty simple. It's just Derek@𝗵𝗁farm.com. So DEREK, spelled like Derek Jeter, not the oil well. So at @𝗵𝗁farm with the V in the front of it, 𝗵𝗁farm.com. But you could find me on LinkedIn. My profile is public. Please, reach out. You can send me a note on that as well. I love talking to people. I love the opportunity to coach and share advice and help people along their own individual journey. So feel free to reach out to me at any time.
All right. And we'll also put links to that in the podcast episode, so you can go directly over there and click on that as well.
Perfect.
Hey, thanks so much for being on. Again, always a pleasure talking. And Kevin, did you have any last thoughts before we go?
Yes, definitely. So it's been thrilling to sit here and talk with you, Derek, and listen to you talking about this new world that you're going into. Because as I heard you talk about, I don't know if you picked it up yourself, there are so many common themes in what you're doing now with what you did before. And you are definitely a creator yourself relative to what it is that you do for a living, and things that inspire you, new ideas, communicating things as best practices, and developing people is always been your inspiration. We've done it together as we've built organizations together, and it was a great partnership there. And to see you applying that and seeing how it is energizing you is great. And I wish you great success with the new endeavor that you're going on to. And I think it's a great lesson for anybody who's watching the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I honestly, you both have been very key, friends and inspirational, colleagues that I've had in my career. And I love what you guys are doing with SSO, and, a lot of the work that I talk about laying the foundation of the house. And, you guys are helping do with your clients, which is part of why you guys are going to have tremendous success with your business as well. So really appreciate you inviting me on. And I love talking about this stuff. It's, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
Well, hey, that's all for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to us on Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. But until then, you have a great week.
Take care, everybody.